Don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to keep up with our latest stories. It was a late autumn afternoon when Clara Bennett stepped off the narrow dirt path that wound from the small countryside schoolhouse to her quiet cabin nestled at the edge of the Oregon woods. The air held a crispness that hinted at winter's approach, and it carried with it the scent of pine, damp earth, and the decaying perfume of fallen leaves. Above her, the fading sun filtered through golden branches, casting long shadows that danced softly across the trail like fleeting memories. Clara, 5 months pregnant, rested one hand gently against her belly, not out of pain, but out of instinct. The baby had been particularly active that day, shifting and stretching in smooth, slow motions, as though responding to the steady rhythm of her footsteps or the distant hush of the trees. She smiled faintly, feeling that familiar flutter of life within her, a secret conversation between mother and child. Walking home had always been Clara's solace. Even after a long day teaching at the one-room schoolhouse, she found comfort in the stillness of the woods. The quiet trail, with its soft undergrowth and whispering wind, helped wash away the chatter of children's voices and the weight of blackboard dust and lesson plans. Out here, with only the forest around her, she felt grounded part of something older, slower, and deeply healing. Her husband, Daniel, worked in a logging town nearly 3.5 hours away, returning only on weekends. Their time apart wasn't easy, especially with the baby on the way, but they had made the decision together. This land, this quiet slice of the world, was where they had chosen to raise their child. Among trees instead of traffic, birdsong instead of sirens. A place where life unfolded gently, on its own time. Clara's cabin came into view as the trail opened up, a modest wooden structure with a wraparound porch, its steps dusted in a blanket of yellow leaves. Smoke curled faintly from the chimney, a sign she'd remembered to stoke the fire before leaving for school. She climbed the steps slowly, brushed off her boots, and stepped inside. The house greeted her with warmth and silence, like an old friend waiting patiently. She removed her scarf, hung it by the door, and turned on the kettle. The simple routines of home soothed her. The low whistle of boiling water, the creak of wood beneath her feet, the faint rustle of wind against the windows. Clara had no way of knowing that everything was about to change. That within days, the quiet world she had so carefully built would be upended by a stranger with 4 legs, a broken body, and eyes filled with a kind of pain that ran deeper than wounds. The next morning unfolded like countless others. Clara rose early, braided her hair, and walked to the schoolhouse where children's laughter echoed in the hallway and chalk squeaked gently against the board. She read aloud stories, guided math lessons, and tended scraped knees with the same calm she always did. By the time she started her walk home, the sun had begun to drop behind the hills, casting the forest in hues of amber and rose. Her thoughts drifted toward dinner, maybe soup and bread, and a worn novel she had left open on her bedside table, pages curled at the corners from repeated reading. But as she rounded the final bend in the path, something unusual caught her eye. At first glance, she thought it might be a fallen log or a mess of damp branches collapsed in the clearing just beyond the tree line. But the shape was wrong, too rounded, too still in a way that wasn't natural. She slowed, her instincts already prickling. Then she saw it. Lying just past the edge of the clearing was a large German shepherd, its body slumped to the ground, motionless. The dog's fur was matted with dried blood, tangled leaves, and streaks of mud. One hind leg was twisted at a grotesque angle, and across its flank were deep claw marks, raw and angry. Clara froze. Her heart began to thud heavily in her chest. Her hand moved protectively to her belly. She was alone, far from help, and visibly pregnant. Every part of her screamed caution. Turn around, go back, protect yourself and your child. This animal could be dying or worse, lash out in fear or pain. And yet, she couldn't walk away. Cautiously, she stepped closer, just enough to see the dog's face. His eyes, barely open, were clouded with pain, but they held something more than instinct or fear. They held awareness. A flicker of trust. A plea. Clara crouched slowly, careful not to get too close. Her breath was visible in the cooling air. The dog didn't growl or move. He simply watched her, breathing shallowly, as if trying to stay awake. Something passed between them in that moment, silent and fragile. Compassion, recognition, an unspoken understanding that both of them, in their own ways, were carrying something heavy, and that this meeting was no accident. Unmistakable, a quiet plea. She whispered, "Hey buddy, what happened to you?" No collar, no tag, no movement except a faint flick of the ear. Clara looked around. Fetrail was empty, and there was no one. She weighed her options: leave him here and he would surely die, try to lift him and she could hurt herself, but her heart refused to walk away. Carefully, Clara gathered a few sturdy branches, teeing them together with the scarf she'd worn, slowly straining with effort. She created a makeshift sled. It took nearly an hour, and every minute the dog barely clung to life when she finally began dragging the improvised stretcher along them. "Trail," she whispered, "just hang on a little longer, you're not alone." Clara didn't sleep much that night after managing to pull the injured dog, who she had already started calling him in her thoughts, up the short slope to her cabin. She had done the best she could. She used a clean towel to wipe away the mud and blood, cleaned the wounds with warm water, and laid him near the fireplace on a thick blanket. She had no idea if it wasn't he hadn't moved, hadn't made a sound. Early the next morning, Clara loaded him carefully into her old baby stroller, one she had kept from her teaching days, for supplies, and wheeled him toward the small clinic just beyond the woods. It wasn't a veterinary hospital, but it was the only facility within walking distance. Inside the nurse seat, the front desk frowned sympathetically, but shook her head. "I'm sorry," she said. "We're not allowed to treat animals. It's against policy." Clara pleaded. Her voice trembled, not from fear, but from urgency. "Please, he won't make it if no one helps him." Morristaff appeared, drawn by the commotion. Clara explained everything: where she'd found him, the condition he was in, the distance she'd carried him. Still, ferals were the rules. Just as Clara was beginning to lose hope, a woman in a white coat stepped from a hallway. "Dr. Ellimore." She listened quietly, then looked down at the unconscious dog. "If you're willing to bring him to my home," Dr. Moore said, "I'll do what I can, but it can't happen here." Clara nodded instantly. Yes. Anything. An hour later, they reached the doctor's small cottage on the hill with steady hands and silent focus. Dr. Moore went to work, and by nightfall the dog woke. Clara now fully believed Wasnam Max was still alive. The days that followed settled into a quiet rhythm. Each morning Clara walked the narrow trail to Dr. Moore's cottage, carrying warm broth in a thermos and a folded towel. Max was always resting when she arrived, but his eyes were clearer now, and they always saw Clara first. Their exchanges were silent but meaningful, a glance, a slow blink, the quiet way Max's ears twitched at the sound of her voice. Didn't need to bark. The connection between them was already strong. One afternoon, while Clara was adjusting his blanket, Dr. Moore walked in holding a new roll of gauze. "You know," she said gently, "I've treated animals in worse shape than Max, but most of them didn't have someone like you on their side." Clara looked at her expression sting. "I didn't think I was doing anything heroic, but when I saw his eyes, I knew he didn't want to give up. I think maybe he chose to live because someone definitely saw him." Dr. Moore gave a small nod, her voice firmer now. "Most people would have walked away, especially Samine in your condition, pregnant Alanino. One would have blamed you." Clara chuckled quietly. "Maybe the hormones played a part, but I think it's more than carrying a life inside you. It makes you see the value of life everywhere." He stood quietly for a moment, then drawn knelt beside Max, her fingers brushing gently through his cleaned fur. Her face, usually stern, softened noticeably. "You did the right thing. Because of you, he has a chance by the week's end." Max could lift his head and nudge Clara's hand. He even tried clumsily to sit up Clara, crouched beside him, whispering with a teary smile, "You're almost home, Max." 2 days later, Dr. Moore made the call. He was strong enough to leave Clara, borrowed a friend's truck, and arrived early. Max didn't bark or jump, but when Clara knelt down and opened her arms, he moved slowly, deliberately, and rested his head gently in her lap. Life with Max settled quickly into a gentle rhythm. Clara set up a warm corner for him near the fireplace where the fading autumn light spilled in through the windows like liquid gold. Max followed her quietly through the house, patient always, just a few steps behind, though still healing. His awareness was sharp. He knew the creak of fevery stare, the timing of Clara's footsin, could sense the shift in her breath. When she was tired, he didn't mind attention, he gave it constantly. One misty evening, miles away from Clara's cabin, Dr. Moore was driving home after a late shift. The sky was ink-black rain, still drizzling as her headlights cut through the fog on a narrow road hugging the ridge a small landslide earlier that week had eaten into the shoulder, leaving the edge dangerously soft. She rounded a blind curve, distracted for just a moment by the glint of rain on her windshield. Then movement, a dark blur streaked across. Thyroid reflex took over. She slammed the brakes and yanked the wheel. Tyra screeched. The car fishtailed wildly before skidding to a halt, mirror in chest from the crumbling edge. Heart-pounding breath caught in her throat. Dr. Moore gripped the steering wheel. The world outside was still. The wipers thudded rhythmically, slicing through. Slowly she stepped out. No animal, no flash of fur, no paw prints in the wet dirt, only the gaping void beyond. Pharaoh, and a chilling realization. 1 second slower and she would have gone over. She stared into the darkness, confused, shaken. What was that? She whispered. She told herself it was luck, a trick of the light, reflexes honed by years of emergencies. She never imagined that something or someone had been watching from the trees, not to scare her, to save her. 2 weeks remained until Clara's due date. Each morning, Daniel called from work to check on her, promising that by the end of the week he'd finish up his last project and take time off to stay with her through the birth. Clara reassured him as best she could. "We're fine," she said gently, her hand resting on her belly, but in truth days were getting harder. Her back ached, her balance was off, simple tasks left her winded. She moved slower, more carefully. Max noticed. He watched her more closely than ever now. If she stood too fast, he rose with her. If she walked from room to room, he shadowed her footsteps like a silent guardian at night. He no longer slept by the fireplace, but at the bedroom door, ears perked, body alert. Sometimes Clara would glance down at him with a tired smile. "You're my shadow, huh?" Max didn't respond, but the flick of his ear or the stillness of his gaze said enough. Even Ruth, the elderly neighbor who dropped by with apples and tea, commented, "He's watching you like he knows something's coming." Clara laughed softly. "Maybe he does." There was a shift in the air, subtle but present. Clara felt it in the hush of the trees outside, and the strange dreams that woke her at dawn. And Max's deepening protectiveness, something was near. Change was close. And Max, though heckled not speak, understood in the way that only animals do. He stayed close and ever straying far, not even for food or sleep, because instinct told him what no one else could yet sense: soon she would need him. Again, it happened on a quiet Tuesday evening. Clara had just finished shaddying up the kitchen, the sink full of warm soapy water. Outside, dusk draped Zephyrus in a soft blue-gray hush. She moved slowly, one hand pressed to her lower back, the other resting on her belly. Max lay by the front door, eyes tracking her every move. She was walking toward the stairs when it struck sudden, sharp, a jolt through her lower abdomen. She froze. Then came the second wave, stronger, unmistakable. Clara gasped. Her hands gripped the wall beneath her feet. A small puddle spread quickly across the hardwood floor. Her water had broken. Heart racing, she reached for her phone in the side table, but as she pressed the screen, nothing, no light. The battery was dead. Her charger, as she suddenly remembered, was still in the bedroom. Shuddering toward Max. "Go get help," she whispered, voice strained. Max leapt up, Hadn't barked, didn't hesitate, he bounded down the porch steps and disappeared into the dark woods, heading toward the only person he had ever seen help Clara Dr. Moore. Back inside, Clara sank to Pfeffler, trying to stay calm. The pain was growing sharper, and now the baby wasn't waiting. Max ran as if guided by something stronger than sight. His paws pounded the wet ground nose. Low breath, steady lights glowed faintly and feet stanced her. Moore's cottage. By the time the doctor opened her door, breathless from knocking, Max was already pacing the porch. "Max," she said, startled, but the urgency in his eyes said everything with it. Another word. She grabbed her coat keys and followed him. Into the night, Dr. Moore drove as fast as the narrow roads allowed. Max in the passenger seat, drenched, panting, but focused. Clara's cabin came into view just as another contraction struck inside. Clara was curled on the floor, face pale, clutching her belly. Her breaths came quick and shallow. Clara Drew. Moore called, rushing to her side, "Can you hear me?" Clara nodded. "It's too fast." Aqua check confirmed it. The baby shirt rate was slowing. There was no time for an ambulance. They had to go with Max pacing. At the door, Dr. Moore helped Clara into the back seat, arranging blankets for support. Max jumped in beside her and stayed closet. Drive to the hospital was tense. Clara drifted in and out of consciousness, fingers tangled in Max's fur, grounding herself. In his presence at hospital, everything moved in a blur. Nurses, doctors, monitors. Dr. Moore stayed at Clara's side through the chaos. The baby's heartbeat was faint. Every minute mattered. After 4 agonizing hours, their doors opened. A nurse stepped out, ice weary but smiling. Their stable, a baby girl. Dr. Moore sat down outside their recovery room. Max was nearby, sitting still, eyes fixed on the door. She exhaled, slow hand resting over her chest. Anthem. It hit her, the ridge, the blurry way that figure had moved. She closed her eyes, recalling the rain, the sharp curve. At the moment she nearly lost control. She looked at Max again, not just with gratitude, but with clarity. She whispered, "It hadn't been luck that night, it had been Max." A week later, Clara was discharged from the hospital, her baby girl nestled in her arms. They named her Emily. Daniel had arrived just in time to welcome their daughter into the world and hadn't let go of Clara's hand since their reunion was quiet, emotional. One of those moments that imprinted itself deep in the heart without needing many words. When they returned home, Max was waiting by the front steps, tail gently thumping against the wood as the car pulled up. Emily, wrapped in a soft yellow blanket, stirred in Clara's arms. Max approached Edsley, head low, tail wagging. "Careful," I sniffed. The heir took one look at the tiny bundle and sat down beside her without a sound. Clara smiled. "She has a protector already." The days that followed were full of soft lullabies, warm meal, sand, quiet awe. Max never left Emily's side. He slept at the foot of her crib, followed Clara from room to room, and seemed to understand the fragility of this new life he'd helped save. Sometimes Clara would glance at Max and whisper, "You didn't just save me, you saved a lot of us." Max had once arrived on Clara's porch, half dead, broken, and unsure if Fueled still held any kindness, but now in every careful step he took beside Emily's crib, and every alert glance cast toward the door, he repaid kindness tenfold. It wasn't just that he had saved Clara's life the night she went into labor, or that he had warned Drew Moore during her own moment of danger. It was how he stayed, how he gave them peace without asking for anything in return. He never barked for attention. He didn't leave when the baby cried or when the house was loud with visitors. He simply remained steady, calm, present, and in doing so, Max reminded them daily that the help we give does not vanish. It finds its way back in moments, in lives, and love. Dr. Moore visited often, bringing tea and quiet conversation. She and Clara never spoke of the rain-soaked night again, but when their eyes met, there was something shared, something unspoken. Apromise. Emily had been born into a home built on kindness, and Max, once lost, broken, and alone, had helped build it, because when compassion finds compassion, life doesn't just survive, it grows. Years later, little Emily, now 5, would sit on that same porch with Max resting at her feet, his muzzle silvered with age. She loved to listen to stories of the night she was born, of the dog who ran through the forest to bring help. Clara would smile quietly, her hand on Emily's back knowing that kindness had built more in a family, it had built a legacy, and the very time Max lifted his head at fee sound. Of Emily's laughter they were reminded some bonds don't fade, they only grow stronger with.